For those that don't know me, my name's Ole Tog the Third. Was born in Juneau, St. Anne's Hospital in 1952. Raised in Teneke until I started high school back in the late 60s, 67. Graduated in 70. Joined the Navy in 1971 when the ANCSA thing was kicking off. Was able to get signed up because my mom sent me the paperwork for that. I'd enrolled for Teneke because that's where we grew up.
My name's Gush Klein Levi Reinhardt. I am of the Nanya Ai clan. I'm a child of the Kiksadi and the grandchild of a Teton. We are the ancestral people of the Stakhin River, which is the Stikine River located near Wrangell, Alaska, one of the 5 landless communities. We've always lived on that land. We still live on that land, and we will always live on that land because it is our land. We've been there for over 10,000 to 15,000 years, and we're not going anywhere.
My name is James Kruchish Hart. I'm from Haines, Deschutes. I'm an artist, president of the Chilkoot Indian Association, basketball coach for the high school. And I have my mom, my brother, and lots of other family members that still reside in Haines.
Our people's connection to the land is one of the most vital things we have. Our language is intertwined with the land. Many parts of our language come from what's around us. And it provides food, it provides medicine, it provides our way of life. We made commodities out of it. We made longhouses, canoes, regalia. The nachin, the chilkat robes are made from mountain goat wool. Our hats are made from cedar bark. Our canoes are made from cedar bark. It all comes from the land, and without the land, we don't have our way of life.
It seems kind of sad that over the last 50 years that all the people in the landless that got left out, a lot of them are gone now, so they'll never realize, anything out of this landless deal. It would have been nice to have a chance at 50 years of seeing something, though, had we all been included. My experience growing up in Teneke is a lot of fishing and hunting as a youngster. I started out from the time I was probably as young as my grandson is now, 5 or 6, and with a rod in my hand all the time, sitting out on the dock. Of course, I had to have a life jacket on, and I would be out there for hours from the time I got up until sometimes they'd have to call me to come home for bedtime. They usually didn't have to call me around dinner time or anything like that, but I'd finish my dinner and get right back out there.
If we owned a piece of our land, we would feel a deeper connection, and it would help our people feel motivated to once again live the way our grandparents lived, harvest from the same areas that they once harvested from, fish from the same riverbanks, and being able to harvest from those places again, knowing that it is where our ancestors once harvested, but also now we own again, would mean more to us than anything.
I mean, if you do look at the footprint of the cities that we've created in this Western civilization today versus the footprint that we left through Tlingit culture or the cultures of Southeast Alaska, we've left it in pristine hands. There's a reason why there's cities in all these beautiful spots. It's because we took care of these places and made sure that it would sustain us for future generations.
Seemed kind of strange that the 5 communities that were left out were left out. It would be nice for something for some of the younger generation. You don't know what's coming down the road. I mean, the way the world is changing all Now, you never know what's going to be here in 50 years.
Just about over 100 years ago, my great-grandparents helped form the Alaska Native Brotherhood and Alaska Native Sisterhood that helped create the ANCSA bill. And my great-uncle, William Paul Sr., he was actually considered the father of the Land Claims Act. And it's unfortunate that his community was left out for no reason. And I've watched many generations go on fighting this fight. I grew up watching my grandfather fight for this for many, many years up until his deathbed. And my father promised him that he would continue fighting until it happens, until we will get our land back. And throughout those years, I've watched my dad fight recklessly to make a difference and make this known and make it be heard again, because newer generations aren't speaking up and aren't coming out in support of this bill because they don't know enough about it.
The longer we wait, the more and more land that's being kind of swooped up, and we're getting pushed further and further away from our homelands. And now we do have an opportunity to kind of recreate, see where we're at today and how are we going to traject ourselves in the future.
Just like my father made that promise to his father, I've promised to him that I will keep fighting past when he is gone, if it still has not happened, because we will keep fighting, and I can guarantee you my children will keep fighting, and so on until it does happen, because it's the right thing to do.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining Sealaska today for a virtual policy update. Today, you're going to hear from members of the policy committee, and we're going to be able to answer questions about Sealaska's policy effort with the help of our committees. Joining us today will be Flaggy Doc, who chairs Sealaska's policy committee. We have officially changed that name to something that represents our traditional words and our traditional wisdoms of working around policy collectively as a Kwan of people. We'll also hear from Laganai Liz Medicine Crow, along with Nicole Hollingstad. Today, we're going to, our host and MC will be Matt Carl. He's the Senior Director of Corporate Communications with Sealaska. And my name is Dixie Hutchinson. I work with Matt and the rest of the communications team. My official title is Community Outreach Manager. We're very excited to have you here with us today and share with you some exciting work that Sealaska has in its future for this year. You'll hear from the policy committee around the importance of having a strategic approach to our policy efforts. Each December, the board takes a look at what's going to be happening in the next year and prioritizes those efforts based on the current needs of our shareholders and our communities. So very excited to share all of that great information with you here today. I want to recognize that we are broadcasting from Juneau. I'm here in Douglas. We're traditional lands of the Taku and Occoquan folks. Many of our leaders are joining remotely, and when they have a chance to talk, they will also recognize the traditional lands that they are calling in from. Right now, I'd like to welcome Matt Carl, if he's able to join us, who's serving as our MC for today.
Thank you, Dixie. Excited to be here with you guys and excited to hear from the three policy members that we have. I'll have my camera on here shortly. I'm dealing with little technical difficulties. That's what you deal with when you're dealing with the virtual environment. Yeah, so today we're excited to share with you, and I thought the video was a great introduction to some of the conversation that we're going to have today around the policy efforts and the advocacy efforts that Sealaska prioritizes. And we prioritize these issues based off of the feedback that we receive from our shareholders. And so it's extremely important that you share your voice with us, you share your priorities with us through, whether it be through surveys or through the Q&A opportunity that we have here today in front of you. It's exciting for us to be able to interact directly with our shareholders, because through these efforts we learn a lot more about what is important to you. And so that's really the purpose of today's discussion, is to really update you on where we are as an organization, what we are prioritizing in terms of our public policy efforts.
And Matt, just quickly on the screen is kind of a more formal land acknowledgement that I was having a little bit of difficulty maneuvering through, but we definitely want to recognize our traditional lands that represent the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people, and we respectfully acknowledge them as the original owners and inhabitants of this region. Of course, Sealaska is headquartered here in Occoquan, Takuquan territory, the traditional lands for folks here in the Juneau and surrounding areas. So wanted to make sure that we formalize that land acknowledgement that's so vital and important to who we are as a people. You know, ANCSA, and the reason why Sealaska exists is because of those traditional and connections to our traditional land. So thank you for letting me interrupt there and quickly add that to our opening here.
Yep, thank you, Dixie. And I think that's extremely important, because it does ground us in who we are, the land acknowledgement. And I think it's extremely important as it relates to the land use legislation. The video that you heard at the top, it's really a compelling story for us, because we feel like through our efforts with the land use legislation, we are going to right some wrongs that have been around for 50 or so years. And so as we shared on the screen earlier, what you're going to hear today is from 3 members of our policy committee. We're going to have an opportunity for you shareholders to ask questions, and we're going to give you a better idea of what we're going to be focusing on through the course of 2024 and beyond through our policy efforts.
Matt, I think at this time it'd be great to ask our board committee members to join us, and we'll do a round of introductions, and then we can get into our agenda for the day. We'll hand it off to Wathlagidak, who chairs our policy committee. And Wathlagidak, I apologize for not calling out the traditional names that we have, that the board has put forward for the name of the committee. And I'm hoping that you can also include that in part of your introduction here today.
Yeah, the policy committee, we kind of made a new rule that whoever the chair is, that's the language that we will choose, even though we put the name of the policy committee in all 3 languages, Hudkil, Tsimshian, and Tlingit, but we are calling it the Hucksta Committee, the Let's Go Committee. Dalang hadala is atlant is asdi gudanai lagang. Good people, it's an honor to be with you today. Frances Demert Peel di Nanu Ijang. Frances Demert Peel was my grandmother. Ilskade Sandra Demert di Au Ijang. Sandra Demert is my mother. Wasal Gidak Hinudi Kiang. Barbara Blake Yaat Satai Hinudi Kiang. My name is Wasal Gidag. My English name is Barbara Blake. Ken Johnson di Had U Ijang. Ken Johnson is my father. He is Nelchina, the Sky Clan, and he comes from Chestachina. He is Atnathabaskan. Gayalas Gustu di Kwalangang, I am a woman of the Raven Moiedi. Diyak Jan Gagang, I am a woman of the Middletown people. Hikta Hanglai Ush Ijang, my people come from Heidelberg. Currently serving as the chair, as Dixie said, and calling in today from Zantakahini. And thank you so much, Dixie, for that great land acknowledgement of where you and I happen to be sitting in this current time. Lagane?
Yeah, just want to also recognize the work you do, not only with Sealaska, but for our communities. And here in Juneau, you serve and have been elected to the city assembly and serve in that role with many different issues that come before the city, such as school budgets or any bigger conversations that you're helping guide and conversate around with our leaders here in Juneau. So thank you for that. Sorry to interrupt, Laganai.
Yeah, no worries. That's good acknowledgement. That's hard work that she's committed to. So how to list good people. Nun Kwaigai Git Kianan Sinudi Nan Kiagan. Nun Kwaigai Git Kianans was my grandmother, Mona Jackson. She was from Haida Gwaii from Masset, and also from Hicktahanlai, Heidelberg, and made her home and life with my grandfather in Cake after she was finished with her schooling. Ganahake Kennedy Chan Kiagan, Ganahake was my grandfather. Tommy Jackson Sr. of Keich Kwan. Hatlangadas, he was Tlinget. And I am the grandchild of his clan, the Tsagwedi, the Kilawell people. Katsas is my mother, Katsas is my Tlingit name. And I go by my Haida name, which is Lagunai. My mother is Tathkawas Delachini. She makes her home in Juneau and also in our community of Cake. My father was Bill Cheney, and we lost him at the end of 2021. And he made his home in my village of Cake, in our village of Cake. I am on my Haida side a Chichkitne, a hummingbird woman. On my Tlingit side, I am Raven, Kutch Uddy, freshwater mark sockeye salmon, come from the Kutis Hit house. And I'm honored to be able to spend time with these wonderful people on the Hauksta committee. And thank you, Dixie and Matt, for giving us this opportunity to share some of the work of the committee.
Aganai too is also no fresh eyes to policy work. While you served with First Alaskans Institute, you helped lead the policy efforts with First Alaskans Institute, and not a statewide organization that works on behalf of our people and our communities. Wathagidak too has spent many years in the state policy world. And our next person who will be joining us today from the policy committee is no fresh eyes to internal policy as well, leading Sealaska's efforts internally by chairing the governance and nominations committee. Nicole, can you provide an introduction today? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dixie. And for all of our shareholders joining us online, it is so wonderful to see you chiming in on the chat and letting us know where you're calling in from. My English name is Nicole Hollingstead. I am zooming in today from the lands of the Dina Aina up here in Anchorage, and want to acknowledge their traditional ownership of these lands. Chakla ruhat dosach yech ayahat tachting tan nachat seti. Tsaqwedi Yadi Ayachat, Norwegian Yadi Ayachat. I am Tlingit Norwegian. I'm Raven Sea Pigeon, born and raised in Petersburg, Alaska. My grandmother was Amy Hollingstead, Amy Yach Yedi, who was just a fantastic and fierce Alaska Native rights warrior from the 1930s all the way to her death in the early 1970s. My parents were Luella and Casper Hollingstead Jr. from Petersburg, and I'm Tucktain from Haynes through Cake to my grandmother's living and moving to Petersburg as a very young woman. So it's a pleasure to be here today. We're excited to talk with you all about Sealaska's policy priorities and work that we do on your behalf. Ganesh Chish.
At this time, I'd like to hand it off to Matt, who will be guiding the rest of the conversation for the day. And again, thanks to everybody who's joining us online and to everybody who's speaking here with us today.
Thank you very much, Dixie. Felt it was appropriate for Dixie to kick this off today because she's from Wrangell, and Wrangell is one of the landless communities that we're fighting so passionately for. And so, Dixie, thank you for everything that you do for Sealaska and everything that you've done in your role advocating on behalf of this effort. And so, as I mentioned at the start, this is an extremely important issue for us, the topic of our policy and advocacy efforts. And so what we're going to shape for you today is a couple of things around how we set our policy priorities, how the board then acts on those, and how we work with our communities, whether it be our traditional communities or our partners, to push these advocacy priorities through at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level. And so you're going to hear today from Wathlagidak, Laganai, and Nicole around how the committee itself plays a factor into that, and how we work together as a management team to really take these priorities and put them into action. And so you're going to hear today on the top priorities, and by no means are these any reflection that if there are some things that you don't hear today, chances are they're somewhere on our list. But these are based off of the discussions that we've had around the board level and input from our shareholders through our shareholder surveys and through the visits that the many visits that we've had with shareholders in terms of being able to really and be very intentional about what we're focusing on as a policy committee for Sealaska. And so with that, I want to just kind of open it up to the three of you from strategically, how do we approach this when Sealaska, when you talk about policy there, it's such a complicated subject. How do you as a policy member take into account all the various aspects of what Sealaska advocates on, and how do you shape that and turn it into something that's actionable? And I'll open up just to, I guess, Wathlagidak, I'll turn to you for that question.
Yeah, it all depends on what we're looking at. We listen, and obviously my day job is as senior director of the Alaska Native Policy Center, and to monitor what's happening policy wise, locally, statewide, and nationally, that has the potential to impact our communities and our peoples. And also listening to our communities and listening to what they say, listening to our membership and seeing where threats are on the horizon, and then figuring out how they fit into the overall plan that we have, that we annually check off. Of course, things flux up into our plan and will hit us on the regular. We don't just only stick to the plan that we passed in December. If things that are emergency issues come up, we obviously will take a look at those too. But there's three little buckets of ways we approach policy. And one of them is the high level advocacy, where we are the leaders in that advocacy fight, right? Where we're the ones leading what takes place, what's happening, and the things that are impacting us. And you see here's a list of 7 areas that we are at Sealaska leading the charge on fixes, either national policy, whether it be statute or fixes in regulation to figure out how we can fix some of these policy priorities. And these are areas, as I said, where Sealaska is investing capacity, investing resources. The other way is supportive advocacy, where we're not the leads on it, but another organization or our tribes or our other people are the leads on it, and that is our supportive advocacy. And an example of that is working with the community of Kiikswan when they were being challenged by the state of Alaska, and the federal government was being challenged for the ability to advocate and to hunt in their region in times of an emergency. And so Sealaska is supportive in that advocacy, but we're not the leads on that, just as an example of what that looks like. And here's some other examples, 8 priorities that we've identified for this year of where we can lend our support. We have the capacity, we have finances to be able to lend support to those existing leaders in our communities and throughout the state who are already working in these spaces to ensure that advocacy is one of the priorities. And then finally, the other area is where we're just monitoring and commenting. We're not a support partner in the work, but we are weighing in by providing comments to federal or state legislation or even local legislation that has the potential to impact our communities. And so we're not partnering up to be a part of that advocacy effort through a movement per se, but we are commenting on those things and monitoring them and making sure that those don't flex up to be in one of those other buckets of a supportive advocacy role or a high level advocacy role. And I'll just say that there's a multitude of buckets that our work lines into. And when we monitor them and when we're making sure as the policy committee, as the HUXA committee, that these objectives that we've set forward are lining up. And when we double check through our quarterly gatherings, those buckets of work land in the realm of lands, waters, foods, culture, and language. And then, of course, there's always an other category that we're always a part of.
Great, thanks, Waslagidak. That is a really good summary of how this a very complicated subject gets really built into a very actionable plan. Laganai, I want to just ask you, as somebody who's spent the better part of your career working on some of these issues, how important is it for us to show progress, and how do you demonstrate progress to shareholders when you have conversations with them? So when they're sitting there from the outside and sitting in Cake or sitting in Heidelberg or Angoon saying, "You guys, we need more help from Sealaska," how do we show them that we're making progress in these areas?
Yeah, I think the best approach that I've been able to participate in, and I think that Sealaska has been really working towards these last many years, is around being really community engaged. And what that means is that at no time are we inaccessible. We have our board, we have our staff going in and out of communities, meeting with our leadership in our communities, hearing from them what their priorities are, sharing about the work that Sealaska is doing, being able to be in those conversations directly to give updates helps people understand where things are in the process. A lot of these issues that we're addressing or kind of taking a big role in and trying to move are long-term issues. You know, our commitment to fighting for our ways of life, protecting our ways of life. This is not something that is going to get fixed overnight. We continually have challenges and have had challenges since the beginning. And so these things are not we've solved the problem, but rather this is where we are lending our shoulder for support. You know, Wathagirak mentioned one when the state of Alaska sued the Federal Subsistence Board because the Federal Subsistence Board granted a special waiver to my community of Cake during the pandemic to go out and hunt. And to go out and hunt to provide food for our community, especially at a time when we needed to be at our most optimal health. And the state felt like the Federal Subsistence Board did not have that authority. And so the Organized Village of Cake stepped in to that litigation, and Sealaska, as support, provided help, continuity, advice, and also advocacy around these issues. So we have to be in conversation with one another, though. During the pandemic, one of the things that I really valued that I saw Sealaska do was set up these virtual meetings with community leaders so that they could be having conversations about each other's priorities and keeping each other looped in, and also building coalition where that coalition was necessary. You know, in this coming year, one of the areas that I think is going to be really important is to continue that type of engagement in person and as well as virtual, because we live in a hybrid world now, and we need to be able to have as many different forms of access to one another so that we can be updated and that people can ask their questions. And so when it comes to kind of giving progress reports, that's really when it's happening, is during this community engagement time. And then, of course, whenever there's big news or a big win, it's great to have a communications team that understands the importance for our community to know that that happened. And so being able to get that out on social media, being able to get that out in our newsletters is also another way of keeping people updated on the progress. I think one of the things that you're going to hear more about is on the land list, but one of the components that I wanted to share about, as an example of progress, kind of updating and reporting to our community, to our shareholders, is, they were recently out in DC, and Richard Reinhardt was able to provide testimony to Congress, and that testimony was recorded and shared out. So people themselves can hear what's being said and the advocacy that's being led by some very dedicated people. So I think, Matt, the easiest or the simplest answer is just communications with one another, continuing the conversations, being engaged, going out to our communities, making sure that when Sealaska leadership or staff are going out to any of our villages, that they're making contact with the leaders in our communities and just having those conversations about those priorities. I also wanted to share another example of some of the policy work, and that's around our monumental art logs. And we've had over the years many of our artists and others who are trying to secure logs that are totem pole size, that are the right kind of species of tree for canoes. These bigger, larger monumental art logs are few and far between in terms of what remains in our forest. And so Sealaska's efforts to kind of inventory and identify the logs that would work best for totems or canoes or the like, in partnership with the Forest Service is really critical. One of the things that we want to make sure happens is that our community, our local organizations, and our artists who are looking to secure those logs for projects, that the process isn't unduly hindered by internal bureaucracy. And so we want to make sure that those things are accessible, and that the way that people can access it makes sense. We have a natural resources department. Michelle Metz is the staff person for folks who are interested in learning more about that program. But again, this is something that's ongoing because we are the stewards of our homelands, and in partnership with the Forest Service, really trying to make sure that these items that people are looking to create can be matched responsibly and based on our cultural values through what actually remains in our forests. So those are just a couple examples of the ways that we're trying to hear things from our community where they identify having trouble trying to access anything. When it gets to us, we try to find ways to streamline the different processes that our people are trying to utilize. And really, that's one of the things that I think is important, to go back to an earlier question you asked around the work of the policy committee. It's all of the things. It's both advocacy at a legislative level, it's advocacy internally to these different structures and systems and institutions, where we can try to make it easier for people to access or make sure that the regulations aren't further infringing on our inherent rights as Native people.
That's a really, really great example. And in terms of our work on the monumental logs, it's one that I think really hits home. I think you made a number of different statements that really got me thinking, right? In terms of trying to cut the red tape, ease the burden of our communities that might not have the resources or capacity to for them. It's not that there's lack of understanding or lack of passion around these, but just the being able to work at the various levels, the federal level, the local level. It's these issues are really complicated, and so the role that we play is just to try to amplify their voice in some ways, address some of the bureaucracy. Just to share a couple of things before I turn to Nicole to talk about landless. For those of you guys that are watching, we have roughly 85 people that are online right now. So hopefully you guys ask a lot of really good questions. On the issue of the monumental logs, Sealaska just recently approved 3 log donations for communities in Southeast. And we do prioritize our traditional communities when it comes to our log donation process. We want to see our art form, the living, breathing art form of our, the canoes and the totem poles, and the cedar bark back in our communities. And so just a credit to those people that are filling out these applications. We have roughly 120 online right now. So thank you to you shareholders that are here with us today, listening. And if you're in one of our traditional communities and you know of a project, or you're passionate about a project, and you have carvers that are in the community that want to do work, encourage them to reach out to Michelle Metz, who Lago and I mentioned, or to reach out to our communications team to learn more about the log donation process, because that's what we're here for. There's nothing better than going to a community and seeing new artwork, new totem poles. You could go to Klawock, Angoon. We just recently supported a project for a dugout canoe in Angoon. Wayne Price was the master carver supporting that, and that's just so cool when you can go back home and see that. So thank you, Laganai. That was a really great explanation of how we do work with our communities. Nicole, we talked a lot about land lists. This is something that's near and dear to you, being from Petersburg, with ties to that community. Laganai mentioned the recent testimony that Richard Reinhardt provided, but can you just give us sort of a 30,000-foot view on where we stand with land lists and what you see as milestones coming down the pike?
Hi, thank you, Matt. Yes, absolutely. I'm always thrilled to talk about our landless effort. You mentioned that I was born and raised in Petersburg. I was enrolled to Sealaska through the community of Petersburg. And any shareholder, any original shareholder who was enrolled to Sealaska through these 5 communities, Petersburg, Wrangell, Ketchikan, Teneke Spring, and Haines, those original shares will always remain basically landless shares. So if you have an ancestor who was enrolled through that community and you've inherited some of those shares are already registered as being landless from those 5 communities. And those 5 communities would ultimately be able to form an urban corporation. So, as many of our shareholders know, we have been advocating for this effort with intensity for the past 15 years, but we have recognized the omission and have been seeking to address these 5 communities being left out of ANCSA for the past 53 years. We were disappointed to see that legislation pass without these 5 communities. And I think it's important for our shareholders who are listening in to be reminded there was specific language in ANCSA that said communities in Southeast Alaska cannot appeal the decisions of this legislation, which means we don't have the kind of legal recourse that people might think that we do. This solution has to fall to Congress to fix the oversight of these 5 communities having been left out. So, pardon me, every legislative session, every congressional session, which runs every 2 years, we have to put forward a bill. And our bill, thankfully, has had bipartisan support in Congress for many, many years. Our delegation puts our legislation forward with every session. We get asked sometimes, why doesn't it make it through the congressional process? And a lot of that, frankly, has to do with what Congress is focusing on. During the COVID years, it was hard to get a land package to get any traction in Congress. They certainly had other priorities that they were attending to. Lately, our legislation has attracted a lot of momentum. We were introduced in both the Senate through Senator McCaskey and Senator Sullivan, and in the House through our new representative, Mary Peltola. In each body, our bill went to the appropriate committee, and it has to be reported back out of those committees to go back to the main floor for a vote. And I'm really excited to say that for the first time since we've been introducing formal legislation, we've actually come out of our Senate committee, and we're waiting to come through our House side committee and continue propelling that legislation forward. The congressional session is 2023 and 2024. So this is the year that we're hopeful we may be able to actually get out to a floor vote of both bodies of Congress and have our bill signed into law by the president. So we continue to advocate for that. Largely what Sealaska's role here is promoting the return and the reconnection of these cultural indigenous homelands to those 5 communities who were left out. We're the last 5 of all of the Native communities in the state of Alaska to have their land settlement. And Sealaska works with these 5 communities. This goes back to Wathlogidoc's point and Laganai's point about how important it is to work with representatives from the community on these policy initiatives. So each of these 5 communities actually has organizations within the Southeast Alaska Landless Corporation. It is a nonprofit entity where representatives from each of those 5 communities come together, continue to work on advocacy, travel to Washington, D.C. Sealaska supports the meetings of this group, the legislative aides and folks in D.C. who help support this legislation. And Sealaska has been vocal about this. We have supported the landless effort to the amount of roughly $1 million. This is Sealaska's highest public policy priority. We will not stop and we will not rest until these 5 communities are reconnected to the indigenous homelands that contain their cultural spirit, their cultural identity, and have those lands available for those shareholders in perpetuity. So I know that there are always a lot of landless questions that we get. I will just say that, reconnecting to those lands is so important culturally, socially, economically. And if and when that legislation goes through, these 5 communities having the ability to stand up an urban corporation, that's important also to note. Urban corporations do not receive 7J money from Sealaska. So standing up these 5 corporations when this legislation passes actually has no financial impact on Sealaska's dividends to shareholders. They're not cutting into any of that 7I or 7J pie. These corporations, like other urban corporations, will be responsible for establishing the corporation, enrolling its shareholders, setting up their own articles, bylaws, boards of directors, and managing that resource, the land resource, on behalf of their shareholders. So we're very excited at our progress. We've recently gotten considerable support from many conservation groups. They understand that Indigenous people are, in fact, the original, and we like to say the very best stewards of our own homelands. And we're excited at our progress. Thank you, Matt.
Great, thank you, Nicole. This is now probably a good time. We got roughly 20 minutes left, and want to leave more time than usual for questions, because since we have so many shareholders that have joined us, so I'm going to take a couple of questions from the chat. I'll start first with Kirsten Eames. Kirsten, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Kirsten asks, how can out-of-state shareholders support landless? Kind of open-ended question. I could leave it to any one of you 3 to raise your hand and answer that one.
Matt, I can take a first run at that. Thank you so much. That is a very important question. And there's a website that anybody can go to, shareholder or not, a state of Alaska resident or not. If this is an issue that is important to you, you can go to withoutland.org, and there's a petition at the bottom that you can sign. It's just a few clicks, and you're lending your support to this landless effort. And the more people we get signing that petition, the stronger our position is in Congress. And oftentimes we will ask folks from a certain state to please contact your legislator. And I'll make an example. Anybody who is a resident of Washington state, if you would feel so inclined to contact the office of Senator Maria Cantwell, she is a senator we're hoping will be moved to support this legislation, but it's very helpful for her to hear from her own voters in her own state that this is an issue that's important to them. So thank you so much for the question.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Loggy Doc or Loganai, anything to add on that in terms of landless or other issues that unweighs out-of-state shareholders? And I guess for context, roughly half or more of our shareholders now live out of state. So there is a tremendous ability that you have, especially within the Seattle area. I think we have in the neighborhood of 7,500 when you expand the 100-mile radius around Seattle. So Loggy Doc or Loganai, anything to add there before we go to the next question?
I'll jump in and say that, you know, as you're seeing things that take place in your community or having contact with your family back here in Alaska or whatever that happens to look like, if you see policy issues, and I saw Monica Ortiz put a good one in the chat that has to do with our 8A businesses. You know, as you see things that come up and you witness, you know, policy implications that have the potential to impact Sealaska Corporation, or just our people in general, let us know. Let us know so that we can put it on our radar, you know, analyze where it's at. You can do it in the chat right now. Let us know if there's policy issues that come up. And then as Nicole said, you know, it would be really, really helpful for folks to contact their legislator or for folks to contact their congressmen and women. You know, she really didn't do it justice when she talks about Marie Cantwell. I'll be the bad guy and say she is adamantly opposed to Native people regaining their land. She has been the thorn in the side of the landless legislation from day one. And so she's your congresswoman, for those of you who are living in Washington. Call her up, send her a letter saying this is absolutely ridiculous that you would oppose Native people regaining their lands. You should not be standing in the way of Native people getting our land back. And so if you have that opportunity, please do. Signing the petition is one thing, but giving her a call, giving her office a call, writing them an email would also go a really long way.
Great, thank you, Loggy Doc.
If I can,
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to quickly add, Monica raised an issue about the 8A contracting program. He raised the question in a prior virtual session. Sealaska is tracking that legislation and staying informed of anything that impacts the 8A contracting. And to follow up too on a point from Log and I about the importance of our monumental logs, that's just one more benefit, right, of these landless communities being reconnected. Sealaska has always made a practice when they encounter a monumental log, those have always been identified and tagged for cultural purposes. They were never included in any timber harvest for sale because we know that there are only so many trees that grow to that size and length for our cultural purposes. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, great, thank you, Nicole. Thank you for covering that question from Monaco. Well, Loggy Doc,
yeah, sorry, Matt. I just wanted to say one more thing. Sealaska is also a part of the Alaska Native, what is it? Regional Corporation Association. I always forget the acronym because they just changed it. But we are part of a statewide organization of the regional corporations. And those individuals who sit on that body are also continuing to track, you know, legislation like Monaco mentioned in the chat here. And so we also have the network of a statewide, you know, footprint to be able to help in advocacy efforts if necessary, if we need it to raise beyond just our region of Southeast Alaska.
If I can, Matt, I'll jump in. I think a good example of programs that are under attack, you know, when we talk about kind of social issues or societal issues in the United States, one of those issues, as we all know, is the issue of race. And we may all have our own experiences and our own thoughts and our own opinions about it. But one of the things that happens is because policymakers don't understand that we have a specific and special political relationship that is not a racial relationship, oftentimes they will start looking at and assessing different types of legislation that they've passed, and people will attack that legislation on the basis of race. So when Monaco brings up the 8A contracting attack, we have to understand the scale of what's happening in the United States around some of these social issues, that because people don't understand the unique relationship Native people have with the federal government, they conflate that as a racial issue. And so they attack programs like 8A and the ability for our tribes and our corporations to be involved in those very specific programs that the federal government set up to acknowledge the special relationship they have, that trust relationship they have with Native people. So these things might be bigger kind of social issues that are out there in the world, and some people have, differing opinions about it, but the fact remains that as Native people, legislation from the federal government that applies to us as Native people is based on our political identity, not our racial identity. And so those are things that we as shareholders should also really understand and be able to advocate for when you are reaching out to your legislators. Most of them on the state side probably have never even had a chance to learn that. And those who are on the federal side, they may know it, but they may not understand how this specific issue is tracking on Alaska Native rights. So I just really want to encourage people to feel really strongly about contacting and building those relationships with your legislators, both in state and in DC.
Great, thank you, Laganai.
Matt, if I can, I just want to tag on to what Log and I just said because it's so important. We all know that tribal nations had complex societies, had expansive rules of law, governed their own people long before anybody else arrived on these shores. So we were recognized as sovereign nations. That's that political relationship that we've always had with the federal government. And it's important also to carry that through with the understanding that our ANCSA corporations, our land settlement was different. The ANCSA corporations were stood up to take title to those indigenous homelands on behalf of the federally recognized tribes in the state of Alaska. So we've got that symbiotic relationship built in through ANCSA. And I know that there's often a question, are the corporations trying to somehow be the tribes? It's really important for us to repeat the answer. No, the corporations understand we are not the sovereign governments of our tribes, and we never will be. Sealaska has a resolution on file to this effect, stating we understand the federal recognition of our tribes. We try to work closely in partnership as the landholder for those tribal members. But there are certain programs that the ANCSA corporations are recognized as being similar to tribes or as a tribe for specific programs like grant programs, our ability to protect our land from infestation or from forest fires, the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act is DIA. It has that specific definition. And it's important for corporations to retain that recognition under that definition to continue receiving the monies that our tribal members are eligible for and have a right to. Simply because we're the land holders doesn't change that. So that's something where there's a little bit of lack of understanding, I think, in lower 48 tribes, that these ANCSA corporations have this special recognition under very specific terms. It's very important to maintain that. So thanks for letting me expand on that.
No, that's great. Actually, you actually covered one of the questions from Clarice Johnson about that distinction. So Clarice, I hope that answered your question on whether or not we as Sealaska try to identify as a tribe or not. So I think, Nicole, I thought your answer was appropriate. Lots of questions in the chat. I'm gonna try to get to a couple of them right now. This was labeled as a public policy update, but we have a couple of questions related to internal policy. So hopefully, I think the three of you guys are equipped to answer this first question from Vicky Mata. She asks about policy on records requests. Does Sealaska have an internal policy on record requests?
Yeah, Matt, I can take a stab at answering that. Many of you know me or remember me as having served as Sealaska's corporate secretary and vice president for 11 years. And yes, there is a Sealaska policy. It is a policy available, to our shareholders. There are certain records that can be requested by shareholders. There are certain records that remain the province of Sealaska as an operating business. But if you have a records request, you should just reach out to corpsec@sealaska.com, and that office would be glad to share that policy with you and let you know what the process is if there are any records that you request for review.
Great, thank you, Nicole. I've got another one from Ray Austin. Ray asked about trawlers. Can we talk about Sealaska's stance on trawling here in Alaska and how it may look different elsewhere in the world? So for any of you guys that are familiar on trawlers, take a stab at that.
Yeah, appreciate that question too. One of our big goals, and this is something that we apply direct advocacy towards, right? One of the main buckets of work where we lead a lot of the work on this happens to involve, as Lagunai already mentioned, our ways of life, otherwise known as our hunting, fishing, and gathering rights as Native people. And we know that trawling is a threat to our hunting, fishing, and our fishing rights as Native people and our ability to be able to provide for our families and our home and our communities. And so when Jaylene was with us as the lead for policy, she did a lot of advocacy directly at the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. She also helped and participated in our biweekly, what First Alaskans hosts is called a Protecting Our Ways of Life working group. And so one of the bigger priorities that the group has kind of honed in on, and that all of Alaska Native communities for that matter have really started paying attention to, is trawling and what that impact has done to the fisheries, to our salmon, to our halibut populations in Alaska. And so, yes, we continue to monitor, we continue to advocate directly for a reduction in the bycatch allowable under trawling, and then also, in support of our tribes and other organizations that are out there doing more direct advocacy. For instance, there is currently litigation against the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council against their continued harm to our oceans, harm to our fisheries, and harms to our salmon and halibut populations through their inability to reduce bycatch through trawling. So all of that to say is it's not being lost on us. We definitely see it, and we're definitely paying attention and making sure that we're involved in various ways through the Sealaska Corporation.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, Matt, I just wanted to expand on that as well. As Wathlogadoc mentioned, we recognize the harm in Alaska. Sealaska does not in any way operate through trawlers for any of our Alaskan product. We do longline. We have relationships with that fishery. And as many of our shareholders know, we have New England Seafoods, Nessie, in Europe. And as an example, much of our Northern European fisheries, Norway, for example, has very strict national laws against trawling. You cannot drag the ocean floor, and there's no such thing as bycatch from that Norwegian fishery, because every single species of sea life that comes up, there is a market for it, and it actually gets sold. So those families, those fishermen, those people who are out fishing, we know that lifestyle well, and the hard work it takes to support your family and maintain, that kind of a business. They actually get paid for the products in those markets. So that's an example where we seek to work with partners who have the same values that we do, that we're aligned with, so that we don't do any harm to our ocean floors. So I hope that's helpful too.
Oh, that's extremely helpful. And Ray, I hope that directly answers your question. I know it's frequently one that comes up from Clarice Johnson. So Clarice, hopefully the explanation that we just provided for you helps drive home the point around trawlers. And as always, if not, feel free to answer, to ask us more questions, because this is something that we want to make sure our shareholders fully understand where we stand on some of these issues. You mentioned Nessie and our seafood platform. One of the questions we had in the chat is with regard to our policy on Alaska Native hire. And I think we've acknowledged that there's opportunity there. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of being able to expand opportunities for our shareholders and our descendants in those markets. For the question from Victoria Mata, or Vicky Mata, is around Sealaska's policy on Alaska Native hire. So if any one of you feel compelled to take that one, I think there's a good message there, and I know that our team will put more information on the chat regarding our policy. We have some info on mysealaska.com.
I can jump in
Okay.
and talk a little bit about our native hire preferences. I want to kind of take it back globally to what we were just talking about in terms of our distinct political relationship, and therein lies the foundation for where our ability to practice native hire comes from. And as a Alaska Native corporation, we are able to have preferential hiring based on our Alaska Natives and our shareholders. And what that preference has kind of been narrowed down to over the years, and it's not just in terms of Sealaska, but other corporations as well, and other Alaska Native entities who have shareholder or Alaska Native preference in their hiring processes, is that, the preference goes to the people who are applying for the same position, and if they're Alaska Native, then they'll be the preferred hire if all other qualifications are equal, which makes it a little bit harder to do. But also it's something that Sealaska has been committed to as long as I have known. The challenge that we have, Matt was referring to it as opportunity. Opportunity means we do have lots of jobs available. We need our Alaska Native people and our shareholders to apply and to go through the process. And through that process, making sure that that we know that they're Alaska Native, that we know that they're shareholders. There's positions in Alaska and there's positions globally. And I think that that's one of the challenges that we have, is trying to get folks interested in the jobs that may not be necessarily connected to their homelands directly, or in their communities or villages. But also I want to recognize too that, times are changing. Like we mentioned earlier, this is a hybrid world. You can work from your village, at home in Cake, like I hope to be doing soon, and work anywhere in the world. So long as the job description, the qualifications that you bring are a good match, and you have the credentials to do whatever is necessary in those positions. I think that that's really important for people to understand. One of our biggest challenges, and it's not just Sealaska, it's every other employer, is having challenges getting employees. And part of that is because our corporate culture in America, and this is not just Sealaska's corporate culture across the country has to shift to better match what employees are seeking right now. There's a huge upheaval since the pandemic. And so some of that will start to probably level out at some point. But right now we're not seeing it, as an employer myself, knowing that, we're getting applicants who could potentially work in our office, but are demanding to have a remote job. And so you have to be able to try to figure out how to match and meet people where they're at. And I think Sealaska Corporation, like all organizations, is going through that same kind of shift and change societally. So when it comes to our Alaska Native preference in hiring, it is currently a practice and has been a practice. And I just want to encourage any of our shareholders or our Alaska Native people to put their names forward if they're interested in any of these positions. We really want to see our shareholder hire go up. that is also a priority of the board. And we do talk about it, and we would love to see these numbers increase. So I hope that answers the question. We're also looking to bring those numbers up. And so if you have ideas on how to help bring those numbers up, that would be appreciated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say real quickly before Nicole jumps in. This is a passion of mine as well. So Vicky, if you have ideas, you know how to reach me. We've met, and I would value your input on this, because this is a nut we're going to crack, and we're going to figure this out. So Nicole, just if you can, we have time for 2 more questions after Nicole.
Thank you, Matt. I'll be very quick. I wanted to add that Sealaska has expanded its internship program significantly over the last 10 years or so. We used to host, 5 to 8 interns. Now we have over 30. We are placing interns into our businesses, even our international businesses. We had 3 interns last summer at Nessie. We are actively looking to develop our shareholders into these roles in our companies. And I know that the intern application, I think, just closed, but I'm hoping we have a really robust, broad body of applicants who are interested. When Sealaska closed down and exited the timber industry, we worked with communities on Prince of Wales. Sealaska helped fund a vocational liaison on the island to help people find other employment opportunities. We have a shareholder development program at Sealaska now. It's been stood up within the last 3 or 4 years. We are actively looking for ways to develop and hire shareholders, and all of those opportunities are there. You can go to sealaska.com to find out more.
Thank you, Nicole. And for those of you guys that know Tesla Cox, her email is very simple, tesla.cox@sealaska.com. She can answer a lot of these questions as well. 2 more questions. These are going to be quick ones because we're running out of time. From Joseph Marks, is Sealaska also engaging in policies that concern affordable housing and/or education policies in Alaska? The answer is yes, but I'll let.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Thank you, Joseph, and thanks to your mom too for making sure that we didn't lose track of that question in the chat. As we're thinking about education and housing, both of those are important to all of us as Native people. I will say that those are really good examples of where we partner, of where we monitor and comment. There are organizations that are dedicated solely to focusing on education for our Native people, focus on housing for our Native people, and so we support where we can. And when we're asked to flex in and monitor, that's what we do. We're not leading any initiatives that directly impact housing or directly impact education at this current time, but we definitely love partnering with our organizations like Lincoln Haida Housing and other organizations who are already doing really good work in this space and making sure that the ball isn't being dropped in any one of the education spaces or in the housing arena. But definitely tune into the assembly sometime too here in Juneau if you want to see some one of the shareholders, one of your board members get fired up about housing though.
Thank you, Nicole or Lagunai.
Matt, I just wanted to add that Sealaska is an active partner in many of the programs that come available to folks through the University of Alaska Southeast. Some of the language programs that are now available as part of their curriculum, we've had a hand in. Development of, it used to be sort of our STEM or STEAM programs, and now things that focus on mariculture in Southeast Alaska. Those are all educational opportunities that Sealaska participates with other partners in. And Sealaska has funded some housing elements there in Juneau where we know affordable housing is needed. There was a project over on Vista Drive in Douglas that Sealaska helped promote. So yes, we do monitor that, have a hand in it, and know how important that is to the development of our folks. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I could take the last question from Randall Johnson. Randall asked if Sealaska is going to have any presence or representation at the Arctic Encounter Symposium. Unfortunately, that aligns with our board meeting in April, so probably unlikely that we'll have like a full coverage presence there. The Encounter Symposium runs from April 10th to the 12th, which coincides with the same dates that our board meets for a very important spring distribution meeting for us. But Sealaska is a sponsor, Randall, and it's something that we've became more and more engaged over the past couple of years. I've personally attended it. I know that others have as well, and so we will have some presence, but not sure how many folks will be there at the board level. But I know we'll have some folks from the management team there.
And then I'll just add that we've been in, well, we at First Alaskans Institute have been involved. We've been asked to speak on a few panels during the Arctic Encounters Week in DC. Randall, I'd love to talk to you more about that particular conference. I know that they've been doing their best to try and center Indigenous voices more and really realign how they approach working with our Native communities. If you have thoughts on how they're doing, I know that the year that I participated on a panel for the Arctic Encounters, it really didn't feel like they were on a trajectory towards change in a significant way, that I felt like they weren't just extracting knowledge from our community, just another form of extraction that we've all witnessed. So if you have thoughts, I would love to talk to you more, and I'll put my email in the chat that's on our feed.
Same here. If the team could put my email in the chat, I'd love to talk with you as well, Randall. All right, we're about 4 minutes over time, 5 minutes over time here, which I think is okay because this is a really important subject. It's one that, as you know, we have policy Zoom sessions scheduled throughout the year. And it's just something that we're going to continue to work at. And as Log and I said, some of these things, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, it's going to take some time to turn some of these things in our favor. So before I close, just a really big thanks to our 3 directors that took time today, Nicole, Log and I, and Wathagidoc. Thank you guys. Thank you to Dixie. Thank you to the team working behind the scenes in the chat, Laura and others. And most importantly, thank you to the 100 or so shareholders that took time today to ask questions, to become more informed, to challenge us to really look at this differently, because this is something that's extremely important to us. And so I'll just close by just saying thank you and how goodness cheese for everything that you guys do for us. And Nicole, you want any closing thoughts, or were you just raising your hand to say goodbye?
Yeah, just a reminder that these sessions are recorded. So if you
Yep.
want to go back and listen to something else, or you know somebody who missed it, we do typically also have a quarterly board Q&A. We initially had hoped to have that in January. We had some scheduling conflicts. We are in the act of rescheduling that within the first quarter. So look for those opportunities as well.
Absolutely. Yep. So more to come on that the rescheduling of that Q&A session. So thank you guys. And we'll see you guys here in a couple of weeks with our next session.
Bye.
Finish.
You know, why we're here is because there's a lot of people that are interested in, you know, carrying our culture forward. And, you know, a lot of folks that have an understanding of how, you know, our culture historically, it went from a high point to a really low point. It's been coming back up, and it's really healthy for all of us. You know, we're interested in keeping that ball rolling for the people of the future. We need to know what we have, you know, in order to manage for the future. And so I think there's kind of a first step, find out what we have. We can go out there, you know, once
crews are trained up, you know, they can go out there and be working on this over the course of time and catalog the trees that are available.
My name is Jason Gubatayo, and I am the general manager of Ha'ani LLC, which is a subsidiary of Sealaska Corporation that's charged with all of its land management activities. Our mission at HAL is to create the greatest financial, community, and cultural value from our lands. Access to cultural use would. Historically, Sealaska has been a major contributor in Southeast Alaska for that supply, and we would like to continue that. Before you can make decisions on sustainable harvest, you have to know what you have and kind of generally where it is. And that's been the mission of this Cedar Recon. And this is something that we are partnering with United States Forest Service and OVK on. You know, we're going to expand it over several years to include all of our lands, but it's our belief that, you know, not only should that be a priority of Sealaska Corporation, but it should also be a priority of all the landowners in Southeast Alaska.